Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iturrate, and the MMA Detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Welcome back to the LytesOut Podcast. I am Mike Davis, along with Miguel Iturrate. Miguel, we've got a special guest in Alan Teo. Alan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Pleasure to be here.
All right, so we're going to concentrate on the 2003 ADCC Trials and actual tournament that took place in Sao Paulo.
Sure.
But to begin with, I'd like to do a little bit of background on you, Alan. I've seen a few of your interviews. Obviously, you're very well spoken. You've had a laundry list of just who's who in jiu-jitsu and MMA that have went and trained with you. Would you mind writing down just a short list?
Right. I mean, so I could start, early on in the 90s, and how I ended up in jiu-jitsu was through Jeet Kune Do. These are, of course, working with some of Dan Inosanto's proteges, Terry Gibson, a guy named Mark McFan, Paul Vunak, Frank Cucci was in the mix. They were doing a lot of seminar series throughout the country, and I would travel to go see those guys and see Dan. And one of the things that always impressed me was their instruction of grappling. Particularly, they were doing a lot of leg locks, a lot of shoot fighting back then. So that kind of guided me towards Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And the first time I saw it was with a guy named Mike Zenga, who you guys may know from BJJ Fanatics.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah. So Mike came to me. Mike and I went to school in Boston, and I was a freshman in 1993, so somewhere between 93 and 94. The first UFC hit, Royce Gracie hit the scene, submitting everybody. It was a big deal. Mike was a boxer, and I was a JKD guy, trying to figure out, what the arts were and some of these other eclectic things. And Mike comes to me and he says, "Hey, Alan, you ever hear of the Gracies?" I'm like, "I don't know. No, I haven't." This is like 1993, 94. I think I was like 17. I was 18 at the time, 18, 19 at the time. So Mike goes, "Hey, there's a guy named Rickson Gracie. He's doing a seminar." And the guy that was hosting it is a guy named Joe Maffey. And Joe at the time was, I believe, a purple. I think it was a purple belt at the time under Rickson. This is like mid-90s. You're purple belt under Rickson. Like, that's big deal stuff, right?
Sure.
Well, I didn't know who Rickson was. So we end up at the seminar, and Rickson walks in, ponytail and everything. Super, super cool guy, super nice, and does his seminar. I fall in love with jiu-jitsu, and the rest is kind of history. So you want to kind of learn who I've worked with through the years, I guess?
Yes, please. Please. It's pretty impressive, your list.
Oh, boy. Well, through Renzo and the Renzo Gracie team, obviously Renzo was my main instructor. A little known guy named John Donaher. I used to do 2 to 3 privates a week with him for years, with some other guys named Joe Capizzi, Carl Massaro, Jamie Cruz was in the mix. Matt Serra was dropping in and out because he had his own school. Who else was there at the time?
Rico Rodriguez?
Rico Rodriguez was dropping, and Rico's like, a very close friend. I've known Rico, oh my gosh, this is going back to, early 2000s, and I think 2001 or 2002. I met Rico at the Arnold Classic in Ohio. He was friends with another friend of mine named Jason Miller, who you guys might know as Mayhem Miller.
Right.
So Mayhem, I've known Mayhem since he was a purple belt training out of Jacare School in Atlanta, Georgia. So Rico was in the mix, coming in to visit. Hadra Gracie, Kira Gracie, Igor, Gregor, Polez. I mean, of course, Sean Williams, Joe D'Arcy, Darce Choke, of course, Magno Gamma. I mean, these are just like
Joe Warren.
Joe Warren, yeah. I mean,
it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop.
I've been blessed to work with some really amazing people.
Were you ever privy to like Frankie Edgar, like in his workouts?
No, that was after I got my black belt in 2007, and Frankie, in a lot of the work he was doing down at where was he training? Ricardo Meadows, I think he was over. He was working mostly down south, those guys, and he was coming up north, of course, and working out of the main academy. But the daytime workouts, I have a day job. So a lot of people don't know that. Even some of my students don't know that I have a day job. So if there's like a daytime workout, most of them I wasn't making. The ones that I made were actually camp for the 2002 Abu Dhabi's.
Okay.
The Abu Dhabi.
So Miguel, 2003 ADCC Trials. How does a guy like Alan Teo get on your radar? You're the one that booked it. I think you were the promoter for it.
Yeah, I think these trials were out in California.
Yep.
So I think Alan was part of a sponsored team from Renzo, because they got to pay for their own plane tickets and stuff. And you come with Renzo's endorsement in Abu Dhabi. And what was nice about it was that this was Renzo, but he had an all-American team, basically. Like, it wasn't like they snuck a couple of Brazilians up from Brazil, that were having trouble competing in Brazil or whatever. This was legitimately his American team, and they were all very good, which was, you had Allen, you had Amal Easton, Joe Darcy,
Sean Williams.
Yeah, Jamal
Patterson, and I believe John Rollo as well.
John Rollo was the heavyweight. That was the guy. So, so we knew they were going to be good guys, and at that point with travel and things like that, I think pencil him in. Alan, I didn't know much about, and he had a brown belt at the time.
Actually, I was a blue belt at the time.
Okay, so
no way.
Yeah, Bravo Eddie was I believe a brown belt when I fought him.
Yeah. So the opening match obviously was against Eddie Bravo.
No, okay. Well, no, it was okay. So my opening match at the trials was against a guy who it wasn't Chance Farrar. Chance Farrar was my second match. Now my mind is throwing a blank, and I actually have the article.
Michael Bland?
Michael Bland, that's right. Michael
Bland. So just so everybody knows, like, the record keeping around that time is very spotty. I've got a bunch of names written down. I couldn't really piece it together. I did the best I could, so we got Michael Bland. Okay.
Even on the Abu Dhabi trials tapes, if you look at the how
it's like in reverse.
Yeah, they actually mislabel my man's match with Chance Farrar as me with Michael Bland, but Chance is the guy that I rear naked choked, and Michael's the guy that I footlocked.
Yeah, I think they have it listed as a knee bar.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be a history podcast. That stuff's important. So thank you very much.
The thing is, though, Miguel, it's so disjointed, and even on the DVDs while watching it, it's like you said, everything's mislabeled. Sometimes they start with the finals and work their way back. It's really strange.
Yeah, and back then there was no social media. Internet wasn't a big thing, right? Well, it was, but it was still kind of in an infancy. So there was, like, all our information came through a magazine. I don't know if you guys remember. Miguel definitely does, called Grappling. There was a magazine called Grappling. If you made it in that magazine, you were like, yeah, that's it. If you made it in that magazine, you were like, it. And then here's the article that made it into that magazine that is from that event.
Cool.
I actually keep it in my school, framed on the wall, because that was kind of one of the things that I was super proud of being in, So,
for sure.
Yeah.
You were a blue belt at the pinnacle, in the sport's biggest, tournament.
Right. It was, to be there was surreal, because there's a story behind it. And I've only told this story to a couple people, mostly my students, and even Renzo doesn't know this story. So I'll tell you guys a story, bro.
We got an exclusive coming.
Yeah, this is kind
a couple of people,
because this is what I tell my students, and it's like it's a life lesson, right? So I was originally with another team. I was doing well, and I wanted to do ADCC. I had a conversation with my trainer at the time. I was like, ADCC, this is a thing. I'm doing well in tournaments. I think one day I might be able to do it. And the guy kind of talked me out of it in a way. He was like, some of these guys are Brazilians. They've been doing it full time for years, their whole lives, this and that. I was a blue belt at the time, but I was beating higher level guys in my belt rank. And at the time, no-gi tournaments were immensely popular, because there weren't a lot of jiu-jitsu schools per se like there are now. So a lot of the information was like centered around some no-gi stuff. So anyway, Jason Miller, how I ended up at Renzo's school is Jason Miller and Rico Rodriguez came to visit me at my house one weekend. And they're like, hey, we want to go to Renzo's. I want you to take us there and visit. And I was like, okay. And I'd already thought about, man, maybe that's the gym for me. I knew Matt Serra. I had a really good interaction with Matt through the tournament circles and just seeing him at, Grappler's Quest, Nagas back in the day. So I walk in and Matt Serra's in there. He's like, Alan, this and that, you got to come train with us. So long story short, I'm there with Jason Miller, Rico, myself. And that's how I kind of got introduced to like the Renzo team, just walking in and checking it out, and just bringing some friends there to work. And Renzo was an awesome host. It was great. Fast forward like a year and a half, 2 years later, Renzo picks me for this American team. And he has no idea that that was one of my aspirations as a martial artist at the time. I never told him I wanted to do Abu Dhabi. I never told him that, I felt a certain way and ended up at Renzo's team because as somebody who coaches now, if I were to tell if one of my students were to tell me that they want to go climb Mount Everest, I'd be like, let me help you put your backpack on. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be the person to tell somebody that they can't do something, especially
Sure.
if they see that they can
It's
do it.
quite an honor.
Yeah. And then Renzo picks me for this team that, Miguel helped for that tournament. Miguel helped put together. And here I am today. Like, that kind of set off a lot of things in motion for me. And for that, I'm forever grateful, Miguel.
So there's a championship mindset. And whenever somebody wins like a regional title, Cutthroatmma used to always say, the fighter maintains their athletic ability of where they're at, but they become 30% better just based on that thing being wrapped around their waist. It's a mental game. I have to assume Renzo approaching me that way must have been pretty emotional.
It really was because he had other students. I'd been with him, a bit longer, but for whatever reason, I was asked. But there's a lot of guys. There's a laundry list of guys at my weight at that gym that could have filled my shoes and could have done equally as well competing there. I just happened to get that opportunity. So
that's fantastic. Well, hard work. That's why you got picked. Hard work.
Yeah.
Miguel,
so take us through the Michael Bland fight. Take us through the Michael Bland fight.
Yeah. So Michael, I knew he was from Las Vegas. I think he was training with Frank Mir's camp. And okay. Frank Mir was a leg lock. If this is my memory serves me correctly. So I knew he was it was going to be good. And I knew he was going to be scrappy. At the time, I was doing a lot of leg locks. If you look at some of my older footage, some of my fights, I do a lot of leg locks. So this guy, I don't think he knew my game. And he just kind of fell into my legs. There was a transition I did from one leg to the other at some point in the match that was real kind of nice for me. I was able to get the final position and finish him there. So that was a great match. Chance was a really tough kid. That the next match was he's coaching UFC fighters now. Chance Farrar. I don't know if you guys have interviewed him, but he's a super tough kid. Awesome wrestler. I've been watching him do some powerlifting stuff on his Instagram from a while back, and I was like, man, that kid's strong. But yeah, that was a great match.
So you wound up in the finals against Eddie Bravo?
Yep. A rear naked choke Chance, and I end up in the finals with Eddie. And
now, refresh my memory. Was Renzo there with you?
No. We all traveled as a squad, just the fighters together. Renzo wasn't there.
Okay.
He's always busy. He's always traveling around and stuff. But no, he wasn't at that tournament with us.
So who's the coach? Like I know obviously you're a coach now, and it's not a far cry to assume you had the mentality. But who's running the show there on that team?
Okay, so when we traveled at that time, the highest ranked guys I believe was Sean Williams and Joe D'Arcy. So Sean and Joe took on the main coaching duties, at least for my matches they did. So most of the time, like Joe D'Arcy helped coach me, I think with Chance, and I forget. Yeah. So actually, here's a photo with here's me footlocking. I believe that's Is that it?
Sweet.
Yep, that's me footlocking Michael. Yeah. and then there's me rear naked choking chance. So, cool stuff.
Yep. No, we
Yeah,
love
for sure.
memorabilia. Everybody needs to bring it. Everybody in future interviews, bring stuff.
Yeah, we do enjoy that. When
I just happen to have it in my school, so.
As you should.
Yeah.
As you should. Absolutely. So with Eddie Bravo,
I got a question.
Have you had issues with this guard? You didn't attempt to pass his guard during your match with him.
Wait, before we get into the fight, I want to know: had you heard of him yet before? Like,
I knew who he was. I haven't. I remember the internet was kind of in its infancy. There wasn't YouTube. I couldn't scout a lot of the fighters if they weren't in Grappling Magazine or if they weren't on one of the VHS tapes that I had of local tournaments. I didn't know a whole lot about these fighters, and I'm assuming they didn't know a lot about me. So when I fought Eddie, I had known that he was a really good brown belt at the time under Jean-Jacques, who obviously is a legend. So if you're coming from that kind of pedigree, I'm absolutely taking you seriously. And I'd already known about his twister maneuver, that crazy back take he took. I believe in the tournament itself, he tried to do that, and they flagged it as a spinal compression.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, so. Wow, you found out. You do your homework.
It was interesting. We actually had the referee on, and for him to even pick that out, because it was just so. Yeah, they always talk about spinal locks, but has anyone really even seen a spinal lock? Other than like a camel clutch.
Yeah, I mean, the twister was such an unorthodox move, for jiu-jitsu. I think back then, because people were so concentrated on like the meats and potatoes of jiu-jitsu, mount, guard, strong, what you call everyday, meat potatoes of it. But the twister was really new. So
now, was the Macedo influence? I mean, that's Renzo's cousins, and they go way back and stuff. Did they pep talk you at all, or did
Jean-Jacques?
Yeah.
No. Jean-Jacques didn't. Actually, in Eddie's corner is Joe Rogan, who's actually a super cool guy. I got a chance to hang out with him a little bit. And Eddie's a cool guy too. But no, they didn't really talk.
Gerald Strebin was also in his corner.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I remember Joe Rogan yelling at Eddie, "How bad you want to go to Brazil, Eddie? How bad?" And I'm like sitting there, I'm like, good grief. I'm like, Jean-Jacques in one corner, Joe Rogan in another, screaming. And it was a fun match. Eddie and I, like, while we're fighting, Eddie's like whispering in my ear. He's like, "Come on, let me go to Brazil. I really want to go to Brazil. Let me go." And it was just kind of fun. I was just like, let's just fight.
That's good. You went the distance, didn't you?
Yep, we did a 20-minute match. If you look at the tape, he pulls guard. In Abu Dhabi rules, you pull guard. In the prelims, like leading up to the finals, you pull guard. You could pull guard in the first 5 minutes, and there's no point penalty. But after 5 minutes, you pull guard, it's -1. In the finals, it's -1 the whole time from start to finish, right? So Eddie pulls guard on me, so he starts out as -1. So you asked me, and some people have asked me, like, how come you didn't try to pass his guard that hard? And he was already down by 1 point. He had pulled guard. He was down by 1 point. So I'm sitting there thinking, why?
That's all you had to do.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. It's not that I was trying to ride out the position, but I knew his transitions out of that half guard position because I'd watched some of his matches before. I knew his transitions out of that position was his thing, right? You can get caught in that sleight of hand type stuff. You got to kind of shut it down. So I tried to lock him down a little bit. Was successful for most of the match, and then. If you notice, I try to go for a lot of different guillotine attacks, neck attacks, and I lost position. I think when I went for one. So
well, Alan, I also think it's important. The longer you hold that position, and more of that sand coming out of the hourglass, the more desperate he becomes, and maybe a little bit more predictable or sloppy and easier for you to maintain that position. So it's actually a very strategic move on your end.
Yeah, when he reversed me, he got points for that. So he beat me technically by 1 point. If you watch the rest of the match, it's all like scrambling back and forth. I get him in a catch guillotine. I thought his neck was going to break. I mean, that was one. If you look at that guillotine position, it's a horrific position for your neck to be in. because it doesn't compress your trachea. It actually puts your neck sideways and it compresses your actual vertebrae. And so that was a horrible position for him to be in. And that's when he talks about in his book, so there's some book he wrote, somebody said he was pretending to gurgle, like I was choking him, and I wasn't front choking him, I was neck locking him more. But it's neither here nor there. He won the match and he was a better man that day. And he's still a great fighter and an unbelievable ambassador for our sport.
That makes all the sense in the world. It's that scoring system. And Alan, I think what you'll attest to is the real fighters, like the people that are absolutely dedicated to the game. They're usually the first people at that rules meeting and they're reading it. They're reading their rule book.
Right. I mean, and we were all back then with Abu Dhabi rules, everybody was studying that stuff because even now, I mean, I'm obviously it's such a high level, people should know the scoring system, but for me personally, it was such a life goal, not life goal, but a goal to get there. Once I decided I wanted to do this and and eventually get the opportunity to do it, I didn't want to mess it up.
Wow. That's fantastic. Now you also got the invite to Sao Paulo.
Correct. So what ends up happening is I take a silver or second place to Eddie in the trials, and I get home and I'm bummed. I'm like, damn it, I blew it. Not going to go to the main event. And I think a couple months pass by, and I'm home just hanging out. And I remember this clear as day because this was a big moment for me. I get a call on my home phone, and it's Renzo calling my landline, right? Back then we didn't nobody just called cell phones all the time. It's like, you call the number you had on file, whatever.
In between the telemarketers.
Right.
Yeah, Renzo called you.
Renzo's calling me on my landline. I'm like, I'm home. I answer the phone in my kitchen. We're talking. He's like, hey man, we're just talking just casually. And he says, hey, you want to go to Sao Paulo? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you want to go to ADCC, Abu Dhabi? I'm like, well, Renzo, I lost the match. I mean, I don't have a spot. He goes, no. He's like, you have a spot. The story he tells me is that the Sheik really liked my fight, saw the tape, and the Sheik liked it. That would be awesome. But maybe Renzo picked me, and he was just kind of being nice and just saying, no, I'm picking you.
Well, you had two finishes. I mean, let's talk about it. You had two finishes in the trial. Chance Ferrara, he's WEC veteran. Micah Miller and Uriah Faber are on his record. So, that's entirely possible.
Yeah. Well, it was nice. So I end up at the main event in Sao Paulo, and that was just, cool.
Really cool. The bottom line is the trials at that point were, I think, now there's thousands of trials all over the place and stuff. But at that point, they were a very elite
group of guys, yes.
Elite group of guys, and just the fact that he was a runner-up allowed him to get into the tournament. Once other invites and things dropped out, they knew they were getting a high-level guy. The fact that it was a Renzo guy certainly didn't hurt, but
No.
You got to play all your cards. Unfortunately, though, when you get to Brazil, you go from Eddie Bravo into the fire, and you get Leo Vieira. So I'm going to let Mike talk.
Yeah. So why don't you talk to us about your ADCC experience in 2003, your memories that you've taken from it?
So one of my best memories is the camp that we had, and the camp. One of my main training partners was Macedo. I got to work a lot with Cutthroatmma. Hadra Gracie was there. Of course, Jamal Patterson. Kira Gracie. I worked a lot with Kira during those camps because, I was the smallest guy, and she's obviously in the female division about my size, or littler than me, but we're the two smallest people on the team. So, and that was, like I mentioned, I have a day job. That was one of the few times I would leave my day job to go train in the city during the day, was to make those camps. So those camps are really special to me, to be included with people I admired and I really looked up to and saw as, inspirational people in my journey. Of course, Renzo was there. There's so many, I'm sure I'm missing. John Donaher was there coaching. It was just such a great camp. So then I get to Abu Dhabi and Sao Paulo, and Hadra Gracie's my roommate. which was really cool. Hodger likes his hotel room super cold. So that's one of the first things. Like, do you like the air conditioning on? I'm like, yeah. He's like, great, all the way down.
So like you had a choice,
right? So we get there, and my first fight is Leozinho, who at the time in my weight division was considered like the Hicks and Gracie of my weight class.
Let me ask you a little bit of the heading in there now. This is early on in when you're going to Brazil. You would think Renzo you'd have that his Brazilian team too. Roger and everybody. Ryan was there.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole group. Like you guys probably had a pretty strong like home field advantage and stuff. But in retrospect, though, Roger got eliminated, Renzo got eliminated. It was a rough tournament for the whole community, And then
Yeah.
Hoyler, who's not, so were there signs of that? Like, I know you did your work, but like, were there signs? Was it too crazy?
For me personally, in all the tournaments I've done, I've only been submitted once, and Leozinho was the one that submitted me. So for me, honestly, I jumped in that tournament. There's a picture, the one and only picture I have of me fighting Leozinho is me almost getting a footlock on him, and him kind of like coming up and defending it and looking for the pass. Because I went for the footlock quick. I knew how good he was. And I was like, so when he passed and he arm in choked me, I was like, whoa. And I think I was one of the first fights to go. So for me personally, to be like, this is a lot for me to deal with. I got this big weight on my shoulders going out there, and doing this. But yeah, I mean, there was
the number one seed. Yeah, got the number one seed.
Exactly. I was fighting the number one seed guy.
So when they announced the tournament, like, when did you find out that was your first round opponent?
I think at weigh-ins or shortly thereafter. But the funny thing about weigh-ins, right, is I was weigh-in, and so I remember I walk in and there's not a lot of fighters there, but one of the guys there is Hoyler Gracie, and I think he was there to just kind of make sure watch all the fighters weigh in, right? But I had already known Hoyler because I worked with a guy named Pedro Valente and Guy Valente out of Miami.
Okay.
My brother Andrew, I've got 3 brothers, and 2 of the brothers train. One of them's a black belt, the other one should be probably purple, but he's a blue. But anyway, so I knew Hoyler Gracie through the Valente brothers, and I used to take privates with Hoyler when I was like a blue and purple belt. So I see Hoyler at the weigh-ins, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be in the same tournament as Hoyler Gracie, right? So definitely the brackets were out, because after weigh-ins, Hoyler grabbed me and he's like, hey, you want to come up to my hotel room? Show me some of the stuff that, Eddie does. I was like, whoa, it's a big deal. Like, I was taking privates from Hoyler. Now Hoyler's asking me for some tips on somebody he could potentially be fighting.
Wow.
Right. So,
you just got to level up mentally at that point. You know what I mean?
Oh my God. I'm in this hotel room on the floor with Hoyler, and we're going through some positions and some half guard stuff that Eddie did, and never. Yeah, I didn't see a triangle. I didn't think a triangle was going to be part of the equation, but we didn't. That wasn't one of the positions we had talked about. It was like we had talked about like twister and kind of how he gets in and out of the half guard position, but like the triangle wasn't something that I think either of us saw coming.
It's like he saved it for the big show, right? It's like he saved that move for the, because it's a sneaky, and he didn't show it at all in the trials.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody had the opportunity to, right? But I mean, a good triangle is a good triangle. You get caught in that, and it's it's game over for most people. Like, unless you really get into the escape position quickly. Once you set it, and you look at Eddie when he's setting it, he's on a mission. That was like, he was not letting that thing go. It was, what a moment, right?
Yeah. And like Eddie, like from what Miguel has said, was requesting that match from like the beginning. And
that
it's one thing saying that, it's another thing receiving that.
That I did not know.
Yeah.
I did not know. Yeah, I mean, I remember I watched that match happen, and I remember when it went down, and we realized who won. It was like not a like I guess a pin could kind of drop because that was in Brazil, right? Sao Paulo. Wheeler's like a national hero there. I mean, everybody loves him.
Oh.
He's a great guy. And to see that happen, and then Eddie erupts with like a huge celebration. It was just like, holy shit, that just happened. It was like, wow.
So for everybody at home,
both of those guys. Let me ask you a question. Because eventually it was Leo who beat Eddie.
Right.
And so now you've watched that develop. Who are you rooting for on that day?
I mean, Leo beat me and Eddie beat me. So, I mean, if I were to root for one, I was probably rooting for Leo. And I was a Leo fan. I mean, I'd watched a ton of LytesOut matches we used to get these VHS tapes from On the Mat, or I forget, they had like, I forget the name of the company that used to do it, but they used to release a couple Poggios, all the different Mondials. And we used to wait for these videotapes to come out, and we used to hoard them. And LytesOut would be on it, Comprito, Roberto Travin. You'd see all, Mario Sperry, all these. I mean, like the who's who. So you see LytesOut, and you're just like, oh my god! And then all of a sudden he's gonna fight somebody that beat me. I'm like, wow, I really want the guy that I've been watching on VHS tapes to win. And to be honest, I kind of knew he was gonna win that match. If I were to put money on it, I would have put, easily all my money in on Leo.
Okay, so everybody at home that's listening, we also had the referee of the match between Eddie and Hoyler on, and he just walked us through just watching it. And he was a huge Hoyler fan himself, and for him to witness it, he walks us through it. He's a Bulgarian Lubo. Okay. So we have a completely different episode dedicated to only that fight. Right. And truly historic.
Yeah, I actually judged it. So I was at the table for it and could see Hoyler do it. So definitely a historic moment. And then from there, the tournament. But your night ended early. What do you do? You're watching the rest of the tournament? What's Team Renzo like? What's like? What's Renzo like when he went down?
Well, I mean, Renzo's always positive, right? And one of the things that Renzo always taught me, he said to me, he goes, Alan, the only fighter that never loses is the fighter that never competes.
It's true.
And
Renzo's a savage, man. He's the best. He's my favorite Gracie.
He's awesome. I mean, I've got some Renzo stories, but
think about it. In a talent-rich family with lots of personality, he rises to the top of a family of all-stars.
Right.
I mean, that just speaks volumes of itself.
Yeah, there's a reason when you say in our industry, in our sport, Renzo Gracie, everybody's like, whoa.
Respect.
There was an interview, I think, was it Cale Sonnen did when he was fighting Spider, where he said he was like talking about Spider, talking about his wife. I want to say it was Cale. Don't quote me on this, but then Renzo called him up and said, what are you doing? You're not, you're disrespect, basically, get your mind out of the gutter. Like, don't disrespect the guy's wife, act classy type thing. And the guy just he realized when Renzo Gracie calls, you freaking listen. I don't know if
it was Sonnen. It was. Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, that just speaks volume, a guy who's got obviously Cale's got a huge ego in a good way that helps, his branding and his fights and whatever.
For sure.
But like when he was able to just say, hey, look, I'll check my ego because Renzo's calling me. I mean, that.
Yeah, I mean, the character stops. Yeah, the character stops at that point.
Exactly.
Think about Renzo. Renzo's, BJJ black belt, MMA veteran, Pride veteran, whatever you want to. He is perfectly comfortable in the streets too. That's the other Renzo that is. I don't see that in Hickson or Hoist. Like, although Hickson has the famous beach fight and stuff like that, but I think pound for pound, Ryan Renzo probably lead the team.
So I had an incident recently where I had a road rage incident, and Renzo replied back. I had posted it up on social media, and Renzo replied back, something like, "I'm not that nice. I've got a quick fuse on me," or something like that. I'll actually pull it up and just quote. I don't want to misquote him, but he's he's known for that type of he doesn't tolerate that.
Well, either does Matt Serra either. Like, and at the time that you're training with Matt, sometimes there's athletes that rise above. If you look at Matt Serra's beginning MMA career, his first few fights in the UFC, he is miles ahead of everybody else in that in the entire sport. The entire sport.
Yep. I as a blue belt back in the early, like the mid 90s. One of the first matches I've seen him that made an impression on me was when he fought Babs Olusomukan. I don't know if you guys know who that is. He's a black belt under Fabio Clemente. He's now an actor. He was just in a movie with Jason Statham. He's doing great. It's good to see him doing well. But anyway, he had a fight with Babs where he did a drop sale on him. And I mean, it was masterful. I mean, he was just miles ahead of everybody at the time. There was Matt, Rodrigo, Ricardo Almeida, right? Those were the guys from Renzo's that everybody was like, holy moly. Like, these guys fought. The whole mat, everybody stopped to watch those guys for sure. I mean, they were also the main event most times. But yeah, Matt Serra, what a guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, Miguel, why don't we wrap up with somebody that I believe, in terms of the submission world, is incredibly underappreciated. We did a long form interview with Eric Paulson. Eric was taking private lessons with Hickson and Hoyce in like the late 80s. Right. Like, Eric Paulson is an absolute savage and a warrior just trying to find the best art. And in it, Miguel had asked him, who was the most influential instructor you ever had? And he said it was Dan Inosanto, somebody that you had trained with. Would you mind closing out this interview with your thoughts about Dan?
Yeah, I mean, Dan, he is a living legend. He's one of the true masters of our sport. Obviously worked with a guy named Bruce Lee. But more importantly, continued on Bruce Lee's work in his own way, which influenced not only the martial arts, but if you look at the movie industry and how many stuntmen and martial artists have come through Dan Inosanto and his program, and how those combat scenes in movies have been influenced by a lot of his teachings is really amazing. But then you look at, legitimate, professional fighters who regard him, like Eric Paulson. He was a Shudo champion.
Yeah.
He fought in Japan. Was it Shudo?
It was Shudo. I think the first American ever to hold that title. Yeah.
Yes. And he was doing leg locks back then, a lot of them. And, some of the stuff that Dan was teaching or still teaches, Pontotoc and Silat, Filipino Cali, you can see a lot of that stuff in some of Eric's work. But Eric is, one of the people that's been one of the higher regarded students from Dan to go out and actually apply the teachings in combat sports. But yeah, what a guy he is. I think he's still teaching in a big way. I see some of his social media, so I'm not sure if he has a school somewhere or what, but he's still in the mix. I mean, they all are. Dan is still going out doing seminars, from what I understand. It's just, a fantastic lineage of people, to be, and I'm fortunate to have trained under Dan in a way through some of his students, but also taking a lot of his seminars and just hearing some of the stories. One of my instructors, a guy named Terry Gibson, whenever Dan was in town, we'd hang out, we'd go to dinners and go to breakfast or whatever. And I got to hear some of these stories, table side with Dan Inosanto, some of his life stories. And it was like pretty amazing. Like some of this he said that Bruce Lee had quite a temper. So it was telling some of I guess if Bruce Lee was alive today, road rage would be more of a thing, possibly.
Oh. He would have went viral a few different times, huh?
So, but yeah. So,
Alan Taylor,
yes,
you are an absolute pleasure. We sincerely appreciate your contributions to the sport, and we're documenting the dark ages of ADCC, and obviously you were part of it, and it's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, guys. And it's great to be part of something that's way bigger than I am, and to be able to one of the things I will say is, when I look at the people I've worked with, and I'm glad you talked about a lot of these people, because I wouldn't be here today doing what I do and enjoying this art if it weren't even for people like Eddie Bravo beating me. Like somebody had said to me, and I'll leave it with this. There were a lot of fighters that got their start on the big stage through Eddie Bravo's tournaments. I think two of them would be Gary Tonin and Gordon Ryan. And somebody had mentioned to me, they said, if Eddie had lost to you and never got the opportunity to fight Hoyler, what would have happened? Like the butterfly effect. We think about, I don't know if you guys subscribe to the butterfly effect and what that means in the world, but if they said, so be thankful that Eddie beat you. He said, be thankful that he beat Hoyler, and be and think of all this, because all of this, it's a butterfly effect, all snowflake. Who knows if Eddie would have had an opportunity like I did at Abu Dhabi at the main event if he took a silver against me. He might have gotten an invite, he might not have. So to be part of that and that narrative and just say, hey, look, I can take some stories to the grave with me that I'd be like, this is what my life experience were, and I'm so blessed. And even to be here with you guys like this, like, Miguel and I have been talking about this interview for a while. Just to even be able to talk to you guys and recap some of these things and be able to show a little bit of appreciation for the people I've worked with is a real privilege and an honor.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it.
No
Thanks,
less,
Mike.
gentlemen. Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel.
Yes, sir.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.